History is not a straight line, but a map filled with strange detours. Objects have been found, scattered across the globe, and buried in deep time, that simply do not fit the story we think we know. They are more than just ancient relics, they are puzzles. These artifacts suggest that knowledge, technology, and artistic vision may have traveled between ancient cultures at a pace that rewrites our understanding of the past. This is not a search for a single lost Atlantis, but an investigation into 20 specific anomalies that, together, paint a picture of a world far more connected and far more curious than any textbook describes. By the end, you will see the ancient world not as isolated chapters, but as a whispering network of ideas. How did a 2,000-year-old jar in Baghdad function like a battery? Why does a wooden bird from an Egyptian tomb look engineered for flight? We will examine the evidence, from contested maps to impossible machines, separating compelling mystery from clear fact. What does it say about us that our history holds so many unexplained corners? One of the most famous and debated artifacts sits quietly in a museum, looking deceptively simple. It is a small, yellowish clay jar about the size of a man's fist, discovered in the 1930s near Baghdad. It dates from the Parthian period, a time between 250 years before the Common Era and 250 years after it. Inside this jar, researchers found a copper cylinder sealed at the bottom with asphalt, and within that cylinder, an iron rod. The entire assembly was also capped with an asphalt seal. To a modern eye, the resemblance is uncanny. If you filled this jar with an acidic liquid, something as common as vinegar or grape juice, you would create a basic chemical battery. The acidic fluid acts as an electrolyte, allowing a reaction between the dissimilar metals of the copper and the iron, generating a small but measurable electric current. The mainstream archaeological interpretation leans toward skepticism, as it often does with such extraordinary objects. One prominent theory suggests it was a storage vessel for sacred scrolls, with the iron rod simply being a core around which papyrus or parchment was wrapped. Another, slightly more adventurous idea is that it was used for electroplating, perhaps to apply a thin layer of gold onto silver objects, a practice known in the ancient world through other methods. This view frames the Baghdad Battery not as a source of power for illumination or mystery, but as a practical, if rare, tool for craftsmen. Yet the provocative possibility lingers, and it is this possibility that makes the artifact a cornerstone of our mystery. What if it was exactly what it appears to be? The voltage produced by a single jar is tiny, less than 1 volt, but connected in a series, several such jars could produce a more significant charge. There is no evidence they were ever used this way. No wires or bulbs have been found alongside them. But the fundamental principle is there, captured in clay and metal over 2,000 years ago. This poses a profound question about the flow of knowledge. Was this an isolated experiment, a flash of insight that flickered and died in one workshop? Or was the concept itself a traveler? Could the idea of this basic electrochemical reaction have been imported from another, perhaps unknown, center of learning, or even exported from this region to elsewhere, lost in the subsequent tumble of empires? The jar does not answer these questions. It simply sits, a silent vessel holding not acid but potential. That potential, however, was not limited to the realm of chemistry. Far to the west, in the clear blue waters of the Aegean Sea, a discovery was made that shattered all previous assumptions about ancient technological capability. In the year 1900, sponge divers off the coast of the tiny Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon the wreck of a Roman-era cargo ship. Among the statues and ceramics, they recovered a lump of heavily corroded bronze about the size of a large book. It was so encrusted and unremarkable that it sat in a museum crate for months before anyone took a closer look. Then, a sharp-eyed archaeologist noticed something astonishing. Peeking through the crust were the faint outlines of gear wheels. This was no statue fragment. It was a machine. Today, we know it as the Antikythera Mechanism, and it is arguably the single most mind-bending artifact ever recovered from the ancient world. Using advanced imaging techniques like X-ray tomography, scientists have been able to peer inside the calcified block and reconstruct its breathtaking complexity. It was an intricate astronomical calculator, a clockwork universe made of bronze. With a hand crank on its side, its dozens of interlocking gears would have moved dials and pointers across several faces, predicting the positions of the sun and moon, the phases of the lunar cycle, and even the dates of upcoming solar and lunar eclipses. One dial tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. Another likely modeled the irregular motions of the planets known at the time: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The precision of its engineering is staggering. It employs a sophisticated differential gear, a component not seen again in the historical record until the automobile workshops of the 19th century. The knowledge encoded in its gear ratios reflects an advanced understanding of Babylonian astronomical mathematics and Greek geometrical theory, all physically manifested in metal. This was not a toy or a speculative model. It was a serious working instrument of science, likely used for navigation, calendrical purposes, or astrological study. The mechanism forces a profound historical question. Such a device does not appear from a vacuum. It represents the pinnacle of a long-developed tradition of mechanical engineering and precise metalworking. Yet we have found nothing else like it from the ancient Greek or Roman world. No precursors, no simpler versions, and no successors. Its sophistication seems to vanish from history for over 1,000 years until similar mechanical clocks reappear in medieval Europe. This suggests a terrifying possibility, a rapid, localized peak of technical knowledge that was somehow lost. Was the mechanism the product of a single genius workshop in Rhodes or Alexandria, whose methods were kept secret and died with its masters? Or does it hint at a broader, but now completely vanished, lineage of complex machinery, whose other examples lie undiscovered or were melted down for scrap? The Antikythera Mechanism is not just an artifact, it is a ghost. It is the tangible echo of a path not taken, a whisper of a technological trajectory that soared to incredible heights and then, for reasons we may never fully understand, fell utterly silent. The silence of a lost technology can sometimes be deafening, but what about an image that seems to speak a language we almost understand? Deep within the Temple of Hathor at Dendera in Egypt, carved into a stone wall from the Ptolemaic period over 2,000 years ago, is a bas-relief that has sparked one of the most persistent modern mysteries. The scene is strange and specific. It shows two large, elongated objects that look strikingly like modern glass light bulbs. Inside each bulb, a snake stretches its body along the length. This snake is held in place, not touching the sides, by a supporting pillar that resembles a socket. A cable or cord runs from the base of this socket to a small box, upon which a kneeling figure rests. To many who see it for the first time, the interpretation feels instinctive. It looks like an ancient electrical diagram. The snake is the filament, the bulb is the enclosure, the pillar is the insulator, the cable is the wire, and the box is the power source, perhaps a version of that Baghdad jar. The scene is even framed by what appear to be towering insulators or supports. The idea is intoxicating. Could this be a technical illustration of advanced knowledge, preserved not in a fragile mechanism but in enduring stone? Mainstream Egyptology offers a very different, deeply symbolic reading. They identify the bulb-like object not as glass, but as a stylized lotus flower, a sacred symbol of creation and rebirth. The snake emerging from it is not a filament but a divine serpent, a representation of the god Harsomptis, symbolizing the moment of cosmic emergence and life force. The pillar is a jed pillar, a sign of stability, and the box is likely a ceremonial shrine. The entire tableau is a complex religious metaphor depicting the moment a deity is born from the primordial lotus, a story of spiritual, not electrical, energy. This orthodox view is backed by the context of the entire temple, which is covered in similar symbolic imagery, and by the complete absence of any physical evidence for glass bulbs, filaments, or electrical systems in ancient Egypt. Yet the controversy persists because it taps into a deeper question about how ideas are communicated across time. Could both interpretations be touching on a shared human instinct? The concept of a contained, radiant power, whether divine light or electric light, is a powerful one. The ancient artists were masters of representing abstract, invisible forces, like the sun's rays or a god's aura, in concrete visual form. Is it possible that the Dendera carving is a symbolic representation of a very real, but non-technological, phenomenon they sought to explain, like a particularly vivid form of bioluminescence observed in certain caves or minerals, interpreted through a spiritual lens? Or, in the more speculative view, does it represent a fragment of borrowed knowledge, a misunderstood description of a technology from another place or time, filtered through the artistic and religious conventions of the Egyptian craftsmen? The stone does not give us a clear answer. It presents us with a Rorschach test across millennia. We see in it either a profound spiritual truth or a lost technical manual, and our choice reveals less about the ancient world and more about our own desire to find familiar shapes in the distant past. While stone carvings can be interpreted, a small wooden object offers a more tangible test. In the year 1898, during an excavation of a tomb near Saqqara, Egypt, dated to around 200 years before the Common Era, archaeologists uncovered a curious artifact. It was a bird carved from sycamore wood, light enough to hold in one hand. At first glance, it was catalogued as a simple figurine, perhaps a child's toy or a ceremonial offering. But its shape was unusual. This was no ordinary depiction of a bird in flight. Its body was not rounded and naturalistic, but streamlined and straight like a fuselage. Its wings were not flapping or spread for perching, but were fixed, rigid, and carefully shaped with a distinct curve, thicker at the front and thinner at the trailing edge. This is a precise aerodynamic feature known as an airfoil, the very shape that gives an airplane wing its lift. At the rear, instead of tail feathers, the carving featured a separate, vertical component, a tail fin. The overall silhouette is uncannily familiar. It looks less like a bird and more like a modern glider or a model airplane. The artifact, now known as the Saqqara Bird, sat in the Cairo Museum for decades as a minor curiosity. Then, in the late 20th century, aerodynamics experts and aviation historians took a closer look. They were stunned. When scaled up and tested in wind tunnels, or when precise replicas were built and thrown, the design demonstrated remarkable stability. It possesses legitimate, flight-worthy gliding capabilities. With a slight adjustment to the angle of its wings, it can soar smoothly for considerable distances. This performance is not an accident of a craftsman whittling a toy. It is the result of specific design principles that directly manipulate airflow. The debate surrounding the bird is a classic clash of interpretations. The mainstream archaeological view is practical. It could be a stylized representation of a falcon, a bird sacred to the god Horus, meant for a ceremonial purpose. Or more simply, it was just a toy, a throwaway object for a child, and its aerodynamic properties are a happy coincidence born from an artisan's eye for graceful form. Yet, the coincidence is extraordinarily specific. The airfoil shape is not intuitively obvious. It is a principle that eluded even the brilliant minds of Leonardo da Vinci centuries later, whose ornithopter designs focused on flapping wings. To create a fixed wing that generates lift requires an understanding of forces that, according to our historical narrative, should not have existed, so we are left with a provocative puzzle. If it was a toy that accidentally discovered a fundamental law of physics. If it was a ceremonial object, it was one shaped by an aesthetic that perfectly mirrors high-speed flight. But there is a third, more challenging possibility. What if it was a model? Not a model of a bird, but a scaled-down representation of something larger, something its creator had seen or heard described. Could it be based on observed principles of gliding flight, perhaps from studying large soaring birds like eagles or vultures with a more analytical eye than we credit? Or, in the most speculative realm, does it hint at a transmitted idea, a fragment of knowledge about flight principles that traveled from some unknown source, was partially understood, and was rendered in wood as a curiosity or a votive offering? The Saqqara Bird does not prove ancient Egyptians had aircraft, but it does forcefully question the timeline of aerodynamic understanding. It suggests that the core concepts of stable, heavier-than-air flight may have been grasped, at least in principle, in a workshop over 2,000 years ago. This knowledge, whether homegrown or imported, then seems to have vanished, leaving behind only this silent wooden key to a door we thought was locked for millennia. The line between a world-changing anomaly and a simple case of mistaken identity can be razor-thin. In the winter of 1961, 3 men searching for geodes in the mountains of Olancha, California, cracked open what they thought was a promising stone. Inside, they did not find the expected crystal cavity. Instead, they discovered a mechanical object. It appeared to be a cylinder of white ceramic, encircled by a rust-colored metallic ring, with a 2mm metal rod running through its core. To the discoverers, it looked unmistakably like a modern spark plug, yet it was completely encased in a hard, rounded lump of mineral. The story, as it began to circulate, was extraordinary. Geodes form over immense periods, and if this object was truly inside one, it suggested an impossible age. Estimates from some proponents ballooned to 500,000 years. Here was a piece of 20th century automotive technology, seemingly entombed in stone from a time when early humans were just beginning to use fire. The artifact, dubbed the Coso Artifact, became a sensation among those searching for proof of advanced ancient knowledge or even prehistoric visitors. It was presented as the ultimate out-of-place artifact, a smoking gun that could rewrite everything, but the story demanded scrutiny, and scrutiny is where the mystery transformed. Experts in geology and materials science examined the find. Their conclusion was definitive, and it unraveled the enigma. The encasing material was not a true geode, which forms from dissolved minerals crystallizing inside a hollow rock. It was a concretion, a hard lump formed when minerals like iron oxide and clay cement around an object, a process that can occur relatively quickly, especially in damp, mineral-rich soils. More tellingly, when the object was finally X-rayed, the internal structure was clearly visible. It was not an unknown mechanism. It was a precisely identifiable 1920s-era champion spark plug, complete with a hexagonal body and the remains of a threaded section. The spark plug had likely been discarded or lost in the desert, and over just a few decades, a rapid concretion process had enveloped it, creating the illusion of immense antiquity. The Coso Artifact serves as a crucial lesson, not an end to curiosity, but a guide for it. It introduces a vital theme in our search for knowledge that traveled too fast, the absolute necessity of rigorous analysis. This object tested our discernment. It was a puzzle that challenged us to separate genuine, inexplicable anomalies from misidentified modern items. a test that, in this case, our scientific methods passed decisively. The danger lies not in asking the question, but in jumping to the answer without allowing the evidence to speak fully. This artifact reminds us that the past is cluttered with both profound mysteries and simple red herrings. Our task is to develop the patience and the tools to tell them apart, because for every Coso spark plug, there might be an Antikythera mechanism waiting, a true signal hidden amidst the noise. The Coso artifact reminds us to weigh evidence carefully, but some puzzles refuse such simple solutions. In the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul, a map drawn on gazelle skin in the year 1513 presents a geographical riddle of a different scale. Created by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, this world map is celebrated for its stunning detail, but one section in particular has ignited debate for decades. The map shows the Atlantic Ocean with the western coasts of Europe and Africa and the eastern coast of South America with a remarkable degree of accuracy for its time. Yet it is the landmass to the south of that continent that fuels the controversy. Many observers see in its contours a startlingly close resemblance to the northern coastline of Antarctica, a continent that would not be officially discovered by European explorers for another 300 years. Even more perplexing, this coastline is depicted largely free of ice, a condition that, according to mainstream geology, last existed on that continent millions of years ago. Piri Reis himself provided a crucial clue in the extensive notes written on the map. He stated that he was not the original author of this geographical knowledge, but a compiler. He cited as his sources about 20 older charts and world maps, including some that he claimed dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. These source maps, he wrote, had been captured from the Spanish and the Portuguese and were among the spoils of war. They are now lost to history. This admission frames the map not as a product of 16th century exploration, but as a window into a potentially far older chain of geographical understanding. The mainstream academic interpretation offers a more grounded explanation. Geographers and historians point out that the controversial landmass is likely a distorted, speculative extension of the South American coast, a common practice in early cartography where unexplored regions were filled in based on rumor, myth, or simple guesswork. The shape's similarity to Antarctica's Queen Maud Land could be a coincidence, a case of pareidolia where we see a familiar shape in an imperfect drawing. Furthermore, the idea of a massive, ice-free southern continent was a classical geographical concept dating back to Ptolemy, known as Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. Piri Reis, they argue, was simply incorporating this long-held theoretical idea into his synthesis of available maps. Yet, the precision of the known parts of the map gives one pause. The accuracy of the Brazilian coastline, the placement of islands, and the rendering of the Atlantic suggest Piri Reis was working from high-quality source material. If those lost source maps contained such reliable data for the known world, what else might they have accurately recorded? The central mystery, therefore, shifts from the parchment itself to the ghostly chain of knowledge it implies. What ancient seafaring cultures whose records have vanished might have charted coastlines with such care? Could fragments of that knowledge, passed down through copies of copies, have survived long enough to inform a Turkish admiral in the Age of Sail? The map does not prove ancient voyages to Antarctica. Instead, it poses a quieter, more haunting question about the fragility of human understanding. It suggests that the full atlas of our ancestors' discoveries may have been far more complete than we can now prove, and that the greatest library of ancient geography might have been lost not in a single fire, but in the slow, silent decay of parchment and the shifting priorities of empires. While maps can hint at lost geography, some mysteries are bound in vellum and sealed in cipher. In the rare book library of Yale University rests perhaps the world's most famous unreadable book, the Voynich Manuscript. This small, 240-page codex was created in the early 15th century, likely in northern Italy. From its binding to its pages, it is entirely ordinary for its time, except for one impossible detail. Its contents are written entirely in an unknown script, an alphabet of elegant, looping characters that correspond to no known language on Earth. Accompanying this undeciphered text are hundreds of intricate, colorful illustrations that are equally baffling, depicting plants that do not exist, celestial charts with unfamiliar constellations, and small, nude female figures bathing in or connected by a strange system of green, tube-like structures. For over a century since its rediscovery by a Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich in 1912, it has resisted every attempt at solution. Top cryptographers from both world wars, mathematicians with supercomputers, and teams of linguists have all applied their skills, and all have failed. Statistical analysis shows the writing has the complex patterns of a genuine language, not random gibberish, yet it defies translation. The most common theory is that it is a constructed script, perhaps encoding a known language like Latin or a vernacular tongue through an invented cipher. But even this theory stumbles as the text's unique properties, like the repetitive nature of certain word roots, do not behave like typical European languages of the period. This has led to more exotic suggestions that it records a lost language or represents an early form of synthetic philosophy where words and images were meant to convey esoteric concepts directly, bypassing normal speech. The illustrations deepen the mystery. The botanical section shows flora with root systems, leaves, and flowers rendered in precise biological detail, yet they are fantastical composites, plants that could never have grown in any European garden or any known ecosystem. One compelling line of thought proposes they are stylized or misunderstood drawings of species from the Americas, sketched from descriptions by early explorers or from now lost specimens, years before sustained contact was officially recorded. The biological sections, with their networks of tubes and basins, could be an allegorical representation of human physiology or spiritual energy flow, a symbolic map of the body's inner workings as understood by a particular herbal or alchemical tradition. The possibility that it is an elaborate, centuries-old hoax is always present, though the sheer consistency and cost of producing such a detailed, lengthy work for no apparent contemporary audience makes this less likely. The Voynich Manuscript, therefore, poses a different kind of transmission puzzle. It is not a machine whose function we can deduce, nor a map we can compare to reality. It is a captured thought process, a snapshot of a mind, or a tradition, operating on a framework of knowledge completely alien to our own. Was its author a lone genius synthesizing obscure sources into a personal encyclopedia of the imaginary? Or were they a scribe, desperately trying to copy and preserve a body of knowledge from a far older, now vanished source, a source whose context and language they themselves did not fully understand, resulting in this beautiful, frustrating ghost of information? The book does not whisper its secrets, it simply presents them, locked behind a door for which we have not yet found, and may never find, the key. There are some puzzles that cannot be held in a hand or stored in a library, but must be walked around and touched to be believed. Deep in the jungles of Costa Rica, scattered across the Diquis Delta and along ancient riverbeds, lie hundreds of massive stone spheres. They range in size from a child's plaything to colossal orbs over 6 feet in diameter and weighing more than 15 tons. Carved by the Diquis culture between 300 and 1500 years ago, these spheres are not rough approximations. They are works of stunning geometric precision, some achieving near-perfect roundness with surface variations of less than a few millimeters across their entire circumference. The material is granodiorite, an incredibly hard igneous rock. The mystery of their creation is a profound one. How did a pre-Columbian society, without metal tools or the wheel, quarry, transport, and shape these colossal stones into such flawless forms? The process likely involved a combination of techniques still understood by skilled stonemasons today. They may have first identified naturally rounded boulders, then used controlled heating with fire and rapid cooling with water to fracture away excess material, followed by a relentless process of pecking and grinding with other, harder stones, perhaps over generations. The true purpose of the spheres is just as enigmatic. When first discovered by modern farmers clearing land in the 1930s, many had been moved from their original positions, erasing their archaeological context. Some theories suggest they were astronomical markers, aligned with celestial bodies or solstice events. Others propose they served as territorial boundaries for powerful chiefs, or as symbols of cosmic harmony and social status, arranged in elaborate patterns near important dwellings. Their significance for our story of traveling knowledge lies not in a specific function, but in their silent, persistent geometry. A fascination with the perfect sphere appears as a recurring motif across ancient and disparate cultures. From the stone spheres of Costa Rica to the carved marble orbs of ancient Greece, from the philosophical ideal of the celestial sphere in China to the sacred geometry of mandalas, this form represents an archetype of perfection, wholeness, and the cosmos. This raises a compelling question. Does this widespread reverence for the sphere represent a universal human inclination, a kind of innate geometric intuition that different cultures discovered independently when they reached a certain level of artistic and philosophical sophistication? Or could it hint at something more tangible, a diffused concept or even a technical ideal that traveled along forgotten trade routes? The knowledge required to create such precision in stone is not merely artistic, it is deeply mathematical and physical. It requires an intuitive grasp of symmetry, balance, and material resistance. If the idea of striving for such perfection was itself a cultural artifact that could be transmitted, then these spheres are not just local wonders. They become physical echoes of a much broader, perhaps shared, pursuit of an ideal form, a whisper of advanced stone-working principles that resonated across continents, each culture leaving its own monumental signature in the enduring shape of a perfect sphere. The pursuit of perfection in stone finds a metallic echo in another ancient wonder, one that stands defiantly against the very flow of time. In the Qut complex in Delhi, a 7-meter-tall iron pillar has been exposed to sun, rain, and wind for over 1,600 years. Yet it shows almost no sign of rust. This is not a modern stainless steel alloy, but a massive column of ancient wrought iron, forged around 400 years after the Common Era. Its resilience is so legendary that local tradition holds that anyone who can stand with their back to the pillar and encircle it with their arms will have their wish granted, a testament to the awe it has inspired for centuries. The science behind its endurance is as elegant as it is advanced. The pillar is composed of exceptionally high purity wrought iron, with a remarkably low sulfur content and a high phosphorus content. This unique chemical recipe, achieved through a sophisticated and controlled forging process, allowed a thin, protective layer to form on the metal's surface over centuries of exposure. This layer is a complex compound of iron, oxygen, and hydrogen called mesawite. It acts as a passive, self-repairing barrier, shielding the iron beneath from the corrosive elements. This level of metallurgical understanding was extraordinary for its time. Creating such a large, singular piece of pure iron required master smiths who could manage furnace temperatures and welding techniques with incredible precision, consolidating multiple lumps of hot iron into one flawless, monumental shaft. For over a millennium, this knowledge appears to have been a brilliant, localized flash. The technological feat of the Delhi pillar was not replicated on such a grand scale until the industrial age. This presents us with a fascinating historical scenario. Here we have clear evidence of a technological peak, a mastery of material science that was demonstrably achieved. Yet it seems to have remained largely contained within that region and tradition. Did the specific formula for this phosphoric iron and the precise forging methods ever travel beyond the Indian subcontinent along trade routes? Could fragments of this knowledge have influenced metalworking in Persia or even farther afield, only to be lost in translation or adapted to different purposes? Or was this pillar truly an isolated marvel, the product of a singular guild whose secrets died with them, leaving behind only this one indestructible sentinel as proof of what was once possible? The pillar does not corrode, but it does pose a silent, metallic question about the corridors of ancient innovation. It stands as a monument not just to a king, but to a fleeting moment of technical genius, a bright node in the network of ancient knowledge that burned intensely in one place, while the rest of the world remained for a very long time in the dark. While iron pillars stand as monuments to human skill, other ancient peoples chose the earth itself as their canvas. Across the arid plains of southern Peru, the Nazca Lines stretch for miles, a sprawling gallery of geoglyphs etched into the desert floor. Created by the Nazca culture between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, these are not small carvings. They are enormous designs, some over 1,200 feet long, depicting stylized animals like a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, and a whale, alongside intricate geometric shapes like trapezoids, spirals, and straight lines that run arrows straight to the horizon. Their most famous characteristic is also the source of their enduring mystery. They are truly comprehensible only from a high vantage point from the air. At ground level, you see only shallow trenches, paths of removed dark surface stones revealing lighter soil beneath. You walk on the image, unable to see its form. The method of their creation, however, is not a profound technological secret. Archaeologists and experimental teams have demonstrated that with simple tools, careful planning, and basic surveying techniques like using stakes and ropes to plot out large-scale designs from smaller models, a dedicated team could create these figures without flight or advanced mathematics. The true puzzle, the one that resonates with our theme, is not how but why. For whom were these immense artworks made if their creators could never see them in their full glory? The leading theories are grounded in the spiritual and practical worldview of the culture. Many researchers believe the lines functioned as a vast astronomical calendar, with certain shapes aligning with celestial events like solstices or the rising of important stars, guiding agricultural and ritual cycles. Others see them as sacred pathways, walked during ceremonies to connect with deities, perhaps related to water, a precious resource in the desert. The figures might represent constellations or spiritual animals, serving as permanent prayers etched into the landscape. This brings us to the compelling question of knowledge diffusion. The Nazca Lines are the most famous example, but they are not alone in the ancient practice of large-scale earth marking. From the giant chalk horses and figures carved into English hillsides to the mysterious geometric mounds and effigies built by Native American cultures across North America, humans have repeatedly felt the urge to make monumental marks on the land, marks whose full impact is often best appreciated from a distance. Is this a universal human impulse, a kind of shared artistic and spiritual grammar that emerges independently when cultures reach a certain level of social organization and a desire to communicate with the cosmos? Or does the specific Nazca expression hint at a more connected idea? Could the concept of creating landscape-scale symbols, intended for an unseen viewer, be a cultural motif that traveled along ancient trade routes, adapting to local beliefs and environments? There is no evidence of direct contact between Nazca and, say, the builders of the Uffington White Horse in England. Yet the parallel is haunting. It suggests a profound similarity in human thought, a desire to inscribe meaning onto the world so permanently that even the gods or the sky itself could bear witness. The lines are not a message from visitors, but perhaps a message about a shared human capacity, a testament to the moment we began to think not just about our place on the earth, but about how our creations might look from the perspective of the heavens. The desire to communicate with the sky is a powerful one, but some stories claim the sky once communicated back. In the year 1938, an expedition led by a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te reportedly entered the remote Baigong Pipes mountains near the Tibet border. Deep within a cave system, they made an astonishing discovery. According to the tale, they found not only ancient graves containing unusually small skeletal remains, but also hundreds of mysterious stone discs, each about 9 inches across with a hole in the center. These discs, later called the Dropa Stones, were said to be incredibly old, perhaps 12,000 years. Most remarkably, each disc was inscribed with a tiny, continuous spiral groove that, when examined under magnification, was claimed to reveal a series of microscopic hieroglyphic characters. The story, as it was later popularized in the 1960s, took a dramatic turn. These characters were allegedly translated and told a tragic, otherworldly narrative. They described a spacecraft from a distant star that crash-landed in the mountains. The survivors, the Dropa people, could not repair their ship and were stranded on Earth. The narrative presented these stones as the first-hand record of ancient extraterrestrial visitors. It is a compelling science fiction premise, woven directly into the fabric of archaeological discovery. However, when subjected to rigorous scrutiny, the entire edifice of the Dropa story crumbles. No credible archaeological journal ever published Kai Pu-te's findings. The supposed translator, a Dr. Tsum Nui, is untraceable in academic records. The small skeletons are far more likely the remains of known, short-statured nomadic peoples of the region. Most conclusively, the discs themselves, when actually examined, bear a striking resemblance to a well-documented type of ancient Chinese artifact, the Bai disc. These are jade or stone discs with a central hole, common from the Neolithic period onward, often used in ceremonial contexts and sometimes decorated with spirals or other carvings representing cosmic cycles. The microscopic writing has never been independently verified or studied by mainstream epigraphers. The scholarly consensus is overwhelming. The Dropa stones are not an archaeological mystery, but a modern myth, likely a hoax fabricated from misinterpreted real objects and layered with sensational fiction. This episode serves a vital purpose in our investigation. It acts as a necessary filter, a test of our own critical thinking. The story entered the popular canon of ancient mysteries not through evidence, but through repetition in sensational books and magazines. It preys on our fascination with the idea of lost contact and hidden histories. The Dropa narrative teaches us to distinguish between a genuine, unexplained artifact that challenges our timelines, like the Antikythera Mechanism, and a story built on unverified claims, missing sources, and a clear disregard for established archaeological practice. It reminds us that the search for knowledge that traveled too fast must be grounded in a disciplined respect for verification, or we risk losing the real wonders in a fog of enticing, but ultimately empty, fantasy. The line between a deliberate hoax and a genuine, world-shifting anomaly can be as thin as a single coin. On the coast of Maine, at a well-studied Native American site known as the Goddard Farm, archaeologists in the 1950s uncovered thousands of artifacts left by the Penobscot people over centuries of seasonal habitation. Among the stone tools, pottery shards, and other domestic items, one tiny object stood out. It was a small silver coin. When cleaned and examined, experts identified it with startling specificity. It was a Norse penny minted between 1067 and 1093 during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre of Norway. This was not a modern reproduction, but a genuine medieval artifact. Its discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological community, for it was found not in the known Viking settlement of Elland's Oaks Meadows in Newfoundland, but hundreds of miles to the south, embedded in the soil of a site that dated from the 12th to the 15th centuries. Here was a potential smoking gun, a physical piece of Europe, deposited on American soil centuries before the voyages of Columbus. The debate that erupted was fierce and illuminating. Skeptics pointed to significant problems. The coin was found not during the initial, meticulous excavation, but during a later sifting of previously dug soil, making its precise archaeological context less certain. This opened the possibility, however slim, that it was a later intrusion, perhaps dropped by a modern collector or even planted as a prank. Furthermore, no other definitive Norse artifacts were found at the Goddard site. No nails, no tools, no signs of a settlement. A single coin, they argued, is not proof of a voyage. It is proof of an object's movement, which can happen in many ways. The prevailing academic view, after decades of study, offers a fascinating and nuanced middle ground. Most archaeologists now believe the Maine Penny is authentic to the time period, but that it likely arrived not through direct Norse exploration of Maine, but through extensive indigenous trade networks that crisscrossed North America. The theory is elegant and supported by known history. The Norse at Elland's Oaks Meadows did have contact and sometimes conflict with the indigenous peoples they called the Skraelings. Trade would have been a natural outcome. A Norse coin, perhaps kept as a curiosity for its shiny silver or unusual markings, could have entered a native trade system. From hand to hand, community to community, over generations, this exotic trinket could have traveled the ancient highways of the continent, moving ever southward along the coast or via inland rivers, until it finally came to rest in a shell heap in Maine, far from its origin. This interpretation transforms the coin from a marker of Norse exploration into a testament to the vast, interconnected web of pre-Columbian America. It suggests that an object could cross the Atlantic in a Viking longship and then cross a continent through a chain of human hands, linking the North Sea to the Penobscot Bay through a slow, deliberate relay of curiosity and commerce. The Maine Penny may not prove Vikings walked the beaches of Maine, but it stands as a powerful symbol of how far and how fast a single piece of knowledge, in the form of a carried object, could actually travel, hopping from one culture to another, leaving behind a solitary, silver clue to a journey we are only beginning to map. Buried beneath the soil of central Mexico lies a face that does not belong. In the early 1930s, archaeologists excavating a burial at the pre-Columbian site of Calixtlahuaca in the state of Mexico uncovered a small terracotta head. The burial itself was securely dated to the late post-classic period, between 1476 and 1510, a time just before or during the earliest Spanish contact. The artifact, however, was immediately jarring. This was no stylized representation of a local deity or ruler. The figure wore a distinctively Roman-style helmet known as a pileus, and its facial features, with a bearded chin and classical European proportions, looked as if it had been lifted directly from a sculpture workshop in the ancient Mediterranean. This is the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head, and it has been a persistent thorn in the side of conventional history for nearly a century. The immediate and obvious implication is as dramatic as it is simple. Could this be physical proof of transatlantic contact between the Roman world and the Americas, centuries before Columbus? The head's proponents point to its context. It was found under several intact, sealed layers of a pyramid platform, a context that, if undisturbed, would strongly support its pre-Columbian age. Stylistic analysis by some art historians has noted its resemblance to Roman sculptures from the 2nd or 3rd century, suggesting it could have been an antique curiosity carried across the ocean. The idea is not entirely without precedent in theory. Roman ships were capable of long-distance sea travel, and occasional accidental voyages far into the Atlantic are documented, though none confirm a crossing to the New World. If genuine, this solitary head would represent a monumental shortening of the historical and cultural distance between the hemispheres, a whisper of classical aesthetics finding its way into a Mesoamerican tomb. Yet, the mainstream archaeological view urges profound caution, and for compelling reasons. The primary counter-argument centers on the possibility of intrusion. The burial was excavated decades ago, and while records indicate it was sealed, the precise methodology of that early 20th century dig is now scrutinized. Could the head have been introduced later, perhaps during the colonial period? Spanish colonists did bring numerous classical artifacts and Renaissance reproductions to the New World as curiosities. It is conceivable that such an object could have been placed or lost in the soil, later becoming mixed into older layers. An even more direct possibility is that the head is a modern forgery, planted either as a prank or to create a sensational discovery. The debate often hinges on a single, frustrating question: can we be absolutely certain the archaeological context was pristine? Scientific tests have added data but not definitive clarity. Thermoluminescence dating, which measures the last time the terracotta was fired, has yielded results spanning a vast period, from around 900 to 1200 years before the present, which could place its manufacture anywhere from the early Middle Ages to the pre-Columbian era. This range is frustratingly broad, neither confirming a Roman origin nor ruling out a post-contact creation, so the head remains in a state of suspended judgment, an emblem of a tantalizing but unproven connection. Its true significance for our story may be less about proving a Roman voyage and more about what it represents psychologically. It is the archetype of the perfect anomaly, the one artifact that, if verified, would force a dramatic rewrite. It embodies our deepest curiosity about hidden connections and our frustration with the incomplete, fragmentary nature of the archaeological record. The Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head does not give us answers. Instead, it holds up a mirror, asking us how we weigh evidence, confront our biases, and ultimately, how we handle the thrilling, unsettling possibility that the map of the ancient world might still have a few missing sea lanes drawn in invisible ink. A weathered slab of gray stone pulled from the roots of a Minnesota poplar tree in 1898 tells a story of desperate survival far from home. The Kensington runestone is carved with runic letters that, when translated, recount a harrowing tale. It claims that a party of 30 Norse explorers, a mix of Swedes and Norwegians, journeyed from Vinland to the west. The inscription, dated 1362, describes a tragic outcome. 10 of the men were killed, and the stone was left as a record by 10 others who were waiting by the sea for a rescue that may never have come. For the Scandinavian immigrants who settled the American Midwest, this stone was more than a curiosity. It was a profound validation, a physical link connecting their new homeland to the heroic sagas of their ancestors. It suggested that Vikings had not only reached North America, but had penetrated deep into the continent's heartland centuries before other Europeans. The academic world, however, met the stone with immediate and enduring skepticism. Linguists and rhinologists subjected the inscription to intense scrutiny, and they found troubling inconsistencies. The runic alphabet used appeared to be a mixture of forms from different centuries, some of which would not have been used together in the 14th century. The language itself contained modern Swedish elements and grammatical constructions that seemed out of place. Most damningly, the very phrase used for the date, "from Vinland," was seen as an anachronism, a romantic term popularized in 19th century America, not a phrase a medieval Norse traveler would likely have carved. The prevailing scholarly consensus is firm. The Kensington runestone is almost certainly a product of the late 19th century, a clever creation by a learned immigrant, perhaps the discoverer himself, Olof Oman, who was known to own books on runes and Scandinavian history. Yet, despite the weight of academic opinion, the stone refuses to fade into obscurity. It has been tested, debated, and defended in countless books and documentaries. It remains a powerful cultural icon displayed in its own museum, a testament to a community's pride and a persistent public fascination. This artifact's true lesson is not about Norse navigation, but about the human heart. It demonstrates how powerfully the desire for a particular history can manifest in physical form. In the search for knowledge that traveled too fast, we must be acutely aware of this impulse. Our own yearning to find connection can sometimes write the very scripts we hope to discover. The Kensington stone challenges us to listen carefully, to distinguish between the echo we wish to hear and the authentic, if often fainter, voice of the past. Mountains can hold secrets deeper than any tomb. In the remote, rugged landscape near Mount Baigong in Qinghai Province, China, reports have emerged of a very different kind of anomaly. Here, scattered across a desolate area, are what appear to be metallic pipes. They are found in 3 primary locations, embedded within solid rock, with some reports describing them as running into the side of a weathered, pyramid-shaped natural formation. The pipes vary in size, from thin straw-like tubes to others nearly 1.5 feet in diameter, and they are often noted for their surprisingly regular, hollow appearance. To the untrained eye, the scene is evocative. It looks like the rusted plumbing of some ancient, forgotten facility, a complex system fossilized in stone. The initial mystery was profound. How could such seemingly manufactured conduits become part of the mountain itself? Could they be evidence of a lost, technologically sophisticated culture that inhabited the region in the distant past? The very idea suggests a narrative of advanced knowledge existing in a time and place our history books have left blank. Scientific investigation, however, has offered a more grounded, yet still fascinating explanation. Geologists who have studied the site and similar formations elsewhere point to a well-documented natural process. The pipes are most likely formations of iron-rich sandstone, created over immense spans of time. Here is how it can work. In sedimentary rock, mineral-rich water can seep through cracks and porous layers. As it flows, the water can deposit minerals, primarily iron oxide, along its path, cementing the surrounding sand grains together into a harder, more resistant tube. Over eons, the softer, less cemented sandstone around these hardened tubes erodes away, leaving the more durable, pipe-like structures protruding from or embedded within the rock face. These are known as sandstone pipes or concretionary structures. Their hollow centers are the pathways the mineral-laden water once traveled. The striking regularity of some can be attributed to the consistent flow of fluids along fracture lines in the rock, a natural process that can produce remarkably straight and uniform features. This geological explanation transforms the Baigong Pipes from a potential archaeological shock into a powerful lesson in perception. They stand as a monumental example of how the slow, patient artistry of geological processes can create forms that perfectly mimic human technology. The mountain, in a sense, has forged its own machinery. This does not make them any less wondrous, but it shifts the wonder from human history to natural history. They remind us that before we invoke unknown civilizations or advanced knowledge, we must first consult the oldest and most prolific engineer of all, the Earth itself. Nature is a master of creating convincing forgeries, from the stone spheres formed by tidal action to the hexagonal columns of basalt that look like carved pillars. The Baigong Pipes challenge our assumptions in a crucial way. They ask us to look deeper, to understand that the most extraordinary explanations are not always the correct ones, and that sometimes the truth written in stone is a story of water, minerals, and time, not of lost tools and forgotten hands. Sometimes nature's forgeries are so perfect they feel like a cosmic joke. In the summer of 1936, a couple hiking along the banks of Red Creek near London, Texas, noticed an unusual rock formation. Protruding from a broken chunk of what appeared to be solid Cretaceous-era limestone, estimated to be over 100 million years old, was the unmistakable shape of a hammerhead. They cracked the rock open to find a complete tool, an iron hammerhead with a partially petrified wooden handle still fitted into it. This is the London hammer, and it became an instant icon in the world of out-of-place artifacts, an object that seemed to defy all logic. The visual is jarring, a seemingly modern tool, trapped in stone from an age when dinosaurs roamed. The immediate, sensational interpretation was irresistible. Could this be proof of a human presence, or even a human-level technological intelligence in the deep, deep past? It suggested a timeline so fractured it would rewrite our entire understanding of human evolution. The artifact, however, is a masterclass in why context and process are everything. When subjected to rigorous geological and metallurgical analysis, a different, more grounded story emerged. The hammerhead itself, while well-made, is not a precision modern tool. Its iron composition is unusual, with a high chlorine content and a lack of the standard alloys found in 20th century steel, suggesting it was hand-forged, likely in the 1800s. The wooden handle showed signs of partial petrification, a process where minerals replace organic material, but this can occur relatively quickly under the right conditions. The true key to the mystery lies not in the hammer but in the stone that encased it. The rock is not a solid chunk of ancient seabed from the age of dinosaurs. It is a concretion, a hard lump of limestone that formed around the object. The area around London, Texas, is rich in mineral-laden waters. If a 19th century hammer was lost or discarded in a creek bed, it could have become a nucleus for rapid mineral deposition. Dissolved calcite and other minerals in the water would have cemented layers of sediment and smaller stones around the tool, hardening into a convincing rind of rock over decades, not millennia. This process can create a deceptively ancient-looking casing with surprising speed. The London hammer, therefore, transforms from a world-shaking anomaly into a powerful lesson in scientific discernment. It is the archetypal out-of-place artifact that, upon calm investigation, finds its place. Its value is not in rewriting history, but in teaching us how to read it. It underscores a critical principle: an object is only as mysterious as the context it is removed from. Without understanding the geological processes at work, the hammer is a baffling relic. With that understanding, it becomes a testament to a natural phenomenon that can perfectly mimic deep time. This artifact reminds us that the past is layered, not just with events, but with processes that can conspire to create perfect illusions, challenging us to look deeper, to question not just the object in the rock, but the story of the rock itself. A hammer trapped in stone reveals how nature can forge convincing illusions, but what happens when the material itself is the impossibility? In 1974, construction workers digging a trench along the banks of the Mureș River in Aiud, Romania, uncovered a strange object buried deep in a layer of sand. Alongside it were two large mastodon bones, an extinct elephant-like creature from the Pleistocene epoch. The object itself was a wedge-shaped piece of metal, heavily oxidized and weighing about 5 pounds. When cleaned and analyzed, the results were shocking. The metal was an alloy composed primarily of aluminum, a material with a very modern story. While aluminum is abundant in the Earth's crust, it is never found in pure metallic form in nature. It is tightly bound in compounds like bauxite. Liberating the pure metal requires an immensely energy-intensive industrial process called electrolysis, a technique that was not invented until the 1880s. The aluminum in the Aiud Wedge was not pure but an alloy mixed with other metals, a formulation typical of modern engineering. The mastodon bones beside it, however, suggested an age of at least 11,000 years. The contradiction was absolute. Here was a material that should not exist for another 10 millennia, resting next to the remains of an Ice Age giant. The implications were as dramatic as they were simple. Could this be a manufactured object from a prehistoric, technologically advanced society? The artifact quickly became a centerpiece for theories of ancient astronauts or lost civilizations, a literal piece of 20th century industry seemingly dropped into the deep past. The resolution to this mystery lies not in the object's composition, but in its context, a lesson archaeologists emphasize constantly. The stratigraphic layer, the specific band of earth in which something is found, tells its true story. The sand pit where the wedge was discovered was not a pristine, sealed archaeological site. It was an active industrial area, heavily excavated by machinery. The most plausible explanation, supported by metallurgists who have studied similar finds, is that the Aiud Wedge is a fragment of a modern excavator tooth or a piece of heavy mining equipment. These industrial tools are often made from incredibly tough aluminum alloys designed to withstand immense abrasion. During digging, such a broken piece could have easily fallen into a deep trench, becoming mixed with much older materials that were churned up from below, like the mastodon bones. Over time, sediment and water action could cement them together in a single layer, creating a false association. This artifact is a perfect example of how the loss of an object's immediate history can transform a mundane piece of machinery into a profound enigma. Stripped of its origin on a bulldozer, the wedge becomes a ghost from two timelines, a silent witness to how easily our own industrial debris can become the puzzling relics of tomorrow. It teaches a humbling lesson. The greatest mysteries are sometimes not about what was left behind by ancient hands, but about what we ourselves have lost track of in the relentless churn of progress. Gold has a way of preserving not just wealth, but a culture's deepest fascinations. In the highlands of Colombia, the Quimbaya people, who thrived from around 1,000 to 1,500 years after the Common Era, left behind a stunning legacy of gold work. Among their pendants and figurines are a set of small, intricate objects that stop modern viewers in their tracks. To the contemporary eye, they look uncannily like sleek jet aircraft or delta-wing spaceplanes. These artifacts, often just a few inches long, feature a main fuselage, a distinct cockpit or canopy bulge, and most strikingly, triangular, swept-back wings set at a precise angle. At the rear, many have what appear to be vertical and horizontal stabilizers, the fins and tailplanes essential for stable flight. The silhouette is so immediately familiar that it feels less like ancient art and more like a model from an aerospace engineer's desk. The standard archaeological interpretation offers a grounded and culturally rich explanation. Scholars identify these objects as highly stylized representations of the natural world sacred to the Quimbaya. They are likely exquisite renderings of birds, insects like beetles or dragonflies, or even certain species of fish, all creatures that held symbolic meaning. The swept wings could be stylized bird wings or the streamlined shape of a fish, the fuselage its body, and the stabilizers its tail, feathers, or fins. This view places the artifacts firmly within a known artistic tradition of abstraction, where artists captured the essence of a living creature through elegant simplification and symbolic form. Yet, the resemblance is so specific it has prompted more than just casual curiosity. In the 1990s, a pair of German researchers, fascinated by the shapes, created precise, scaled-up models of several Quimbaya objects. They tested these models in wind tunnels not to prove ancient flight, but to satisfy a simple question: how do these forms behave in an airflow? The results were startling. The models exhibited remarkable aerodynamic stability. They flew smoothly as gliders, with the swept wings and stabilizers functioning exactly as they would on a modern aircraft to prevent stalls and spins. This performance suggests the shapes are not merely decorative, they inherently possess the geometry of flight. This leaves us with a profound and beautiful puzzle. Are we, as modern people, victims of a powerful pareidolia, seeing jet planes in the same way one might see a face in the clouds, because our minds are saturated with the imagery of our own technology? Or did the Quimbaya artists, through generations of observing birds, insects, and perhaps even seeds twirling through the air, intuitively grasp and abstract the very principles of stable, aerodynamic form? Could their artistic pursuit of a creature's essence have accidentally, or perhaps intentionally, converged on a shape that physics demands for smooth passage through a fluid, whether air or water? The artifacts do not suggest hidden airstrips or forgotten engines. Instead, they point to a different kind of knowledge, one that may reside in the intersection of deep observation, artistic genius, and the universal laws of physics. They whisper that the path to a true understanding of flight might not have begun in a laboratory, but in a goldsmith's workshop, where the goal was not to conquer the sky, but to capture its most graceful inhabitants in a shimmering, eternal form. Gold captures form, but our own biology holds a deeper story of survival. While we search for evidence of knowledge in objects, some of the most compelling clues about our past are written within us, in the very code of our DNA. Recent studies of ancient human genetics have revealed a startling chapter in our collective history. They point to a period roughly 70,000 years ago when our species, Homo sapiens, came perilously close to vanishing entirely. The data suggests our ancestors experienced what scientists call a severe population bottleneck, a time when the total number of breeding humans may have dwindled to just a few thousand individuals, scattered in isolated groups across Africa. This was not a gradual decline, but a sudden, drastic contraction of the human family tree. The timing of this genetic pinch coincides remarkably with a cataclysm of almost unimaginable scale, the eruption of the Toba supervolcano on what is now the island of Sumatra. This event was the largest volcanic explosion in the last 2 million years. It ejected enough ash and aerosols into the atmosphere to trigger a volcanic winter that may have lasted for years, disrupting climate patterns, reducing sunlight, and causing widespread ecological collapse. For the small bands of early humans struggling to survive, this would have been a time of extreme hardship, a fight for existence against a darkened sky and a failing world. Yet here we are. The genetic record shows that after this brush with extinction, our population did not just slowly recover, it exploded. The groups that survived possessed a remarkable resilience. They adapted, innovated, and began a journey that would eventually take them out of Africa and across every continent on Earth. This rapid dispersal and diversification is itself a form of lightning-fast transmission, not of technology, but of people, ideas, and genetic potential. In the space of a few tens of thousands of years, a species on the brink became a global species. This biological backdrop is crucial for understanding the artifacts we have explored. It tells us that our very nature is shaped by catastrophe and recovery. We are the descendants of survivors who learned to cooperate, to share knowledge of new tools and new lands, and to adapt with incredible speed when the world changed around them. The capacity for rapid innovation and the diffusion of ideas is not an anomaly in human history. It is woven into our origin story. The Toba event and its aftermath set a stage where the swift movement of knowledge became a survival trait. So when we later find objects like the Antikythera Mechanism or the Quimbaya airplanes, we are not looking at isolated miracles from a static past. We are seeing later echoes of that deep-seated, ancient impulse to understand, to create, and to share discoveries quickly across vast distances. Our genes remember a time when sharing the right idea at the right moment meant the difference between an ending and a beginning for all of humanity. This deep history of survival and innovation finds its most enduring symbol not in genes or gold, but in stone. Across the globe, from the deserts of Egypt to the jungles of Guatemala, from the plains of Mesopotamia to the river valleys of China, ancient builders repeatedly raised the same monumental shape against the sky, the pyramid. These structures, separated by oceans and millennia, share a startling geometric kinship. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the stepped temples of the Maya at Tikal, the ziggurats of ancient Sumer, and the massive earthen pyramids of China's Shang dynasty all converge on a simple, powerful form, a broad base tapering to a point high above the earth. At first glance, this global echo feels like a whisper of a shared blueprint, a single idea that traveled the ancient world at impossible speed. The truth, however, begins with a lesson in pure physics. The pyramid is not a random aesthetic choice. It is the most stable structure possible for achieving great height with primitive materials. A broad, heavy base distributes weight evenly, resisting collapse. Stacking layers inward as you rise creates a self-supporting mass that can withstand earthquakes, storms, and the relentless passage of time. For any culture that sought to build something monumental, to reach toward the heavens, or simply to create a platform that would last forever, the pyramid was not just an option, it was the logical, perhaps inevitable, engineering solution. Different cultures arrived at this same answer independently because they were asking the same fundamental question: how do we build something immense and permanent? This is convergent invention in its purest form, like birds, bats, and insects all evolving wings for flight. The Egyptians used stone blocks for smooth sides, the Mesopotamians used mud brick for stepped terraces, and the Mesoamericans built stone cores faced with stucco, each adapting the universal principle to their local materials and climate. So the mystery is solved by practicality, a testament to human ingenuity repeatedly discovering the laws of gravity and geometry. Yet the story does not end there. While the how is explained by engineering, the why lingers as a deeper puzzle. Why did so many disparate cultures not only choose this stable shape for their grandest projects, but also imbue it with such profound and similar symbolic power? In Egypt, the pyramid was a resurrection machine, a ramp for the pharaoh's soul to ascend to the stars. In Mesoamerica, the stepped pyramid was a sacred mountain, a stage for rituals connecting the earthly realm with the gods of sky and underworld. The Mesopotamian ziggurat was a bridge between heaven and earth, a dwelling place for deities. This recurring theme of the pyramid as an axis linking the human and the divine, as a focal point of cosmic energy and ceremonial passage, is too persistent to ignore. It suggests something more than independent problem-solving. It points to a shared archetype, a primordial human intuition about the nature of the universe. The pyramid as a shape physically embodies a foundational concept, the idea of a world mountain, a central point where order emerges from chaos, where the earthly realm meets the celestial. This archetype may be so deeply embedded in the human psyche that when a culture reaches a stage of complex social organization and spiritual expression, it naturally manifests this inner image in its most ambitious architecture. The form itself becomes a physical prayer, a collective dream built in stone. So were the pyramids evidence of a single traveling knowledge, probably not in a literal sense. But they may be evidence of a different, even more fascinating kind of transmission, the transmission of a profound symbolic idea through the shared substrate of human consciousness. They stand not as proof of ancient contact, but as monuments to a universal human longing to build our highest aspirations into the very landscape, to reach for the heavens from a foundation that will never falter. The recurring patterns across these 20 artifacts begin to form a map of their own. They do not point to a single lost city or a secret global civilization. but to something perhaps more profound, a series of brilliant, flickering nodes of human potential scattered across time and space. We see a persistent fascination with specific forms, the perfect sphere, the stable pyramid, the aerodynamic curve, each emerging independently as solutions to universal human questions about the cosmos, stability, and motion. We witness metallurgical genius in the Delhi pillar, astronomical precision in the Antikythera Mechanism, and a deep observational understanding of natural principles in the Quimbaya goldwork. For nearly every object, a plausible, conventional explanation exists, grounded in local cultural context, artistic symbolism, or the remarkable tricks of geology and time. The Baghdad Battery could be a scroll case, the Dendera light a sacred symbol, the Saqqara Bird a toy, and in cases like the Coso Artifact or the Dropa Stones, we see clear examples of modern intrusion or myth-making. This rigorous skepticism is not the enemy of mystery, it is its essential filter. It separates the signal from the noise, yet when we step back and view this collection as a whole, a compelling impression remains. The collective weight of these anomalies, even with their individual caveats, suggests that the narrative of a slow, linear climb from primitive to advanced is incomplete. It paints a picture of ancient human ingenuity as more inventive, more capable of sudden leaps, and potentially more receptive to distant ideas than our standard timelines often depict. The critical distinction lies between evidence of direct contact and the phenomenon of parallel intellectual evolution. The Maine Penny shows how an object can travel, hinting at tangible, if rare, connections across vast distances. The Piri Reis map hints at lost source material, a ghost chain of geographical knowledge. But for every potential connection, there are 10 instances of convergent invention, the pyramid being the ultimate example, where separate cultures arrived at the same brilliant solution because they faced the same universal challenge. This is not about proving that Egyptians taught Mayans how to build, but about recognizing that the human mind, when confronted with the mysteries of the sky, the desire for permanence or the dream of flight, can arrive at startlingly similar insights across the millennia. The true implication of these artifacts is not that history is wrong, but that it is richer, more punctuated with flashes of advanced thinking, and far more resilient in its capacity for rediscovery. They remind us that genius is not the sole property of the modern age, but a latent spark in humanity that has ignited, faded, and reignited countless times, leaving behind these tantalizing fragments as beacons from our own forgotten potential. So where does this leave us standing before these 20 scattered clues? The most honest conclusion is not a revelation of lost super-civilizations, but a quiet, profound shift in perspective. The ancient world was not a series of isolated rooms, each waiting for the next to invent the wheel or chart the stars. It was a dynamic, whispering network, a tapestry woven with threads of independent genius, startling coincidence, and the rare, precious filament of contact across impossible distances. These artifacts are not pieces of a single, shattered puzzle. They are individual signposts, each pointing down a different forgotten road in the vast landscape of human potential. Some mark moments of breathtaking local innovation that simply faded away, like the Antikythera Mechanism's silent gears. Others, like the Maine Penny, are physical tokens proving that objects, and the ideas they carry, could journey across continents through the patient relay of trade and curiosity. Many, like the perfect spheres of Costa Rica or the pyramids that touch every continent, show us the power of convergent invention, the human mind repeatedly arriving at the same elegant solution to a universal challenge. What emerges is a history less like a straight, ascending line and more like a constellation, bright points of advanced understanding flaring up in different times and places, often dimming, but sometimes passing their light across the dark. This is not a call to abandon skepticism, but to refine our wonder. For every genuine mystery that stretches our timelines, there is a Coso artifact to remind us of nature's forgeries or a Dropa stone to warn of seductive myths. The true lesson of these 20 artifacts is not about proving what was, but about questioning what we think is possible. They celebrate the restless, ingenious spirit that has always driven us to measure the stars, shape metal against fire, and carve meaning into stone. They remind us that our past is deeper and more inventive than any single narrative can contain, filled with quiet geniuses whose names are lost but whose creations still speak. So let these mysteries not be endings but beginnings. Let them inspire you to look closer, to research further, and to hold both a sense of awe for the unexplained and a respect for the careful, patient work of uncovering truth. The greatest artifact we inherit from the ancient world may not be any single object, but the enduring human drive to ask, how did this get here and what does it say about us? That curiosity is the one thread that truly connects us across all the ages.